Shalom Aleichem. Welcome to Tanya Inside Out at G4 Tuf Shin Pei Vav. Last week we said we were doing chapters 16, 17. We only did chapter 16. Okay, so now we're going to go into chapter 17. And there's a whole bunch of massive yesodus that come out of chapter 17. Really important yesodus. So we'll try our hardest to finish it, but all these ideas really require a lot of attention and explanation. So, if you remember, everyone remembers what the whole sefer is based on. A pasuk in Devarim. A pasuk in Devarim which says, "Ki koroiv elecha adav ma'oid b'ficha levavacha la'asoisoi." Yeah, that this thing is close to you. Very close to you, in your mouth, in your heart, to do it. Okay, and it's interesting just because the beginning of Shayichad V'Emunah, which is the second chelik of this sefer, he begins by what we say in Aleinu every day, V'yadat hayoim, v'ashayvois el levavacha ki Hashem hu Elokim, b'shemayim ma'al, v'haaretz mitochas einoid, v'tzrich lahavin. That all there is God. Yeah, we need to understand this. So this is something that Rav Manis drew out. What? Yeah. So something that Rav Manis has impressed upon me over the years. And this is just so practical it's just so practical that the Rebbe begins with a question that you have, and he validates your question. I don't know if there's any more powerful, human, I don't know what you call it, any more powerful human interaction than validation. If you validate someone, yeah? That doesn't mean you validate something that's ridiculous. Like I've said many times with my wife, the idea of emotions, yeah? If we just gave the example, of someone in Australia to take it away from our immediate experience. That if they get a phone call, a girl in Australia gets a phone call that her parents died in a plane crash. Yeah, they were coming home on a plane, and then she gets a phone call that there was a plane crash. Her parents are dead. Yeah, imagine the emotions that she's going to be feeling. Deep, real. Mama's real emotions, yeah? She'll be broken. And then 5 minutes later, there's a knock at the door. It's her parents. There was a mix-up. They weren't on that plane. So what do you say about her emotions before? Were they real emotions? They were real emotions, but they weren't valid emotions. Yeah, that's a very important idea. You have to create that. They weren't valid. What?
What do you mean valid?
They weren't valid. They were based on a misunderstanding. They were based on a misrepresentation of reality. She was feeling real emotions that her parents had been killed.
That was a reality then.
What?
If it was true or not.
Well, no, if it's true, they're valid emotions. If it was true, they'd be valid emotions. They're real emotions. They're always real emotions. Emotions are always real. The question is, where did they come from? Did they come from a real place?
They always come from the same place, if it happened or not. It's the thought of it happening. It's not the actual thing that happened.
You're right,
won't fall apart.
The trigger.
But we're trying to say. Explain to me what's the difference between this girl thinking that her parents were nifta when they weren't, and thinking that her parents are nifta when they were. What's the difference?
The emotional side, nothing. The emotional side, nothing.
Right, the trigger was there.
Exactly. But which one? This is what I'm trying to say. Which ones are valid? Which ones aren't valid?
Like, what is valid is like a stamp in the end and saying, like, this is valid.
Valid means if someone's parents are nifta, you are entitled to and should be feeling some very deep emotions.
Like a statement, if you have to at the end.
It's meaning that they not that they're real, emotions are always real. The question is, did they come from a valid source? Like if someone comes home and they say, everyone's like looking at me and like judging me, yeah, and I feel terrible. What do you say to that? No one's looking at you, no one cares about you.
The only difference between valid and invalid emotion is how long it's going to last. Because if the invalid emotion, you take away the shorish of it, then it becomes a fleeting emotion. But if you validate it with reality that it is true, then it's something that could affect you for the rest of your life. But that's the only true difference. Otherwise, how you feel at that moment is the same.
You're right. That's what I'm trying to say to you. But this person has no right, so to speak, to feel like this when her parents weren't nifta. That's a weird way of saying it. Anyway, the point is that that the Rebbe is validating the fact. He brings this statement that this thing is very close to you, and you're like, no, it isn't. I feel this is really actually very far from me. My heart is pulled in all different directions, and I've got my own personal agenda that I want to get on with. So he validates that. He doesn't say, no, you're wrong. I remember asking someone a question a while ago. Big Talmud talk. I asked him a question, and his response to me, "Oh, that's not a question." And then he didn't explain very well at all. Yeah, but I remember that feeling of being invalidated. Yeah, and then another nice story that I have was with my he's now 12. When he was 10, we're learning the Rambam. Yeah, I don't know if you've ever learned Mishnah Torah, but there are an overwhelming majority of that sefer is extremely boring to read, yeah, to say the least. And we were learning something that was extremely boring. I can't remember. And it was on Shabbos morning, and I'm sitting with him in my office, and I said to him, Yochanan, I said, isn't this just so geschmack? Aren't you loving this? Yeah. And he was like a good Hasidic kid. He kind of looks at me like what you have to do in yeshiva when they tell you how geschmack it is to learn Gemara, yeah. And you're just hearing that from everybody, and you don't feel that whatsoever. So he kind of looks at me and goes like, yeah, like that. And I tell him, what are you talking about? This is the most boring thing I've ever learned in my life. I would rather be anywhere right now than sitting here in front of this sefer, yeah? And just seeing this kid smile. This was like a couple of years ago. It's still imprinted upon me. Just that like, the fact that I validated how he was feeling as opposed to, no, you're wrong. Are you not enjoying Gemara? Are you wrong? Yeah, there's something wrong with you, yeah? As opposed to I did the opposite, and he just, mama's big. So the Rebbe validates us. Number one with Sefer Beinonim, with the Kuta Marim. Yeah, he validates you and says you feel that it's close to you. Yeah, so you don't feel that it's close to you. That's completely understandable, and I'm going to explain to you now what that means and how it works. And then by Shayichud V'Amunah, the same thing. He says, Einod Milvadoi, there's only Hashem. And let me explain to you, because it doesn't appear that way. It doesn't appear that way, Bichlal. It looks like there's lots of other stuff other than Hashem. In fact, I don't even see Hashem Bichlal. So you're telling me a statement from the Torah that says there's only Hashem. Let me explain that to you. That's like the foundation of the whole of Sefer Tanya. That's the foundation of the Alter Rebbe. He was like he was a goy in oilam and something else, yeah. But there's so many stories of like his humanity and how kind and warm he was, and this is just such an important. And this is what, pardon me. This is what's really what we're talking about. I thought a lot about our conversation this week, that you're talking about Reb Morgenstern, yeah, being a big tzaddik. And again, I'm not saying he's not a big tzaddik. I'm not saying that at all, but I was questioning your criteria for calling him a big tzaddik. And you're not alone. Like, everybody has the same kind of criteria, yeah? Which is all to do with, how much he closes his eyes, how much he rolls his eyes back, yeah, how, like, kind of what a weird schedule he would have, and all kinds of funny stuff, yeah, that is not a gilui of his tzidkus bichlal. So I was talking to you about the real danger with that. Again, I'm not saying he's not a tzaddik. The danger of thinking of tzidkus like that is that you end up aiming for something that isn't tzidkus. You with me? And you're not alone. In fact, I'm alone by saying what I'm saying right now. Is that the foundation?
That the tzidkus is the byproduct of actually being a tzaddik, rather than
no, not tzidkus. Wait, you're calling all those big avoiders tzidkus?
Let's call it tzidkus just for the sake of.
Call it avoiders. Call it the avoiders.
Yeah,
Don't call it
the
tzidkus.
avoiders are a byproduct of being a tzaddik, but then people aim for the avoiders.
No, the avoiders are a gilui of his personality. That's what the avoiders are.
But with the tzaddik,
Tzidkus.
and the personality one.
Yes. No. What? No. No. The inner world is one. Yeah. But the personality is always going to be its unique. You get people who are gevurdik, you get people who are chesedik, you get people who are emesdik, whatever the kind of personality they have, yeah? So one person who's a person who is very chesedik, truth will get expressed in a very different way to a person who's gevurdik. So what you're talking about is the avoiders of that person, of that man, yeah? Tzidkus is the inner experience of no inner experience, of there's no personal agenda. I have no agenda. Now that could end up looking like it could take on many different forms, depending on what kind of personality this person has. So that's what we need to learn. So when we're talking about emulating the tzaddik, again, it can look like Yitzhak's avoider look very different to Avram's avoider. You don't hear about Yitzhak having a tent open on all four sides, etc., yeah? And you don't hear about Avraham getting taken up and getting shechted on a mizbeach. And you don't hear, everyone's got a different, you know what I'm saying?
Isn't a personality an agenda then?
What?
Would the personality then be the agenda?
The agenda? No, well,
that a tzaddik has no agenda. But
no, personality is not an agenda. Personality is the kalim.
Personality is driving choices that we make.
No, it's how the choices express themselves, what they end up looking like. It's the keli. The personality is the keli behind what the rotzon is generating. So if you have a chesedik personality and you're a tzaddik, you're like what's his name? Jerry Latinik. You know Jerry Latinik? Yeah?
Yeah.
So he's a very chesedic guy, yeah? So, I don't know if he's a tzaddik or not. Let's assume he is. He has opened up this massive chesed organization, and look what he's doing in the world, you know? That's not the same as like somebody else who's very gevurdik, who's his avoider would express itself maybe in Tanesim and with Cephas in learning Torah, etc., etc. We're just saying, but we get caught up in what it looks like, yeah. So that's not what we're aiming for. Do you understand? We're aiming for the ascension, going beyond our own sense of independent self. That's what tzidkus is. So you can get it again. Somebody could have a very impressive looking avoider and not be a tzaddik bichlal. Yeah, that's how it could be. But again, and you could be a very big tzaddik and have a very impressive avoider. Yeah, that's the point. But when we hop onto the chetzonius of what it is, it doesn't give us something to aim for. You with me? So the stories, going back, the stories of the Alter Rebbe, the stories of the Alter Rebbe are very much geared around there's a lot of famous stories on Yom Kippur where he went to chop wood and help the almana and all kinds of, with giving up his what's it called, the money when he got married to give to all his avoiders for tzedakah and everything. So all of these kinds of so that the Alter Rebbe, although he was a goy in Olam, yeah, in Chabad, generally the stories given over of him are much more kind of warm and loving as opposed to the his feat of intellectual. You understand what I mean? Yeah? So I'm just saying this is a very important gilu of this. That the whole sefer is predicated on the fact that he kind of validates your question, he puts his arm on your shoulder and says, you're right, it doesn't appear to be close. So let's try and explain. So let's try and explain that, yeah?
But sometimes it's a part of the fun.
The what?
I mean, it's sometimes part of the fun.
What?
To dig where it's hard to dig,
To do what's hard to do.
To dig where it's hard to dig.
What do you mean?
When you're studying something that's boring, sometimes there's how would I say? שערה גם בדבר הזה. הוא דווקא לחפור איפה שקשה.
In what regard? You mean like in understanding the depth of...
You feel that you're not connected, right?
Yeah.
So I'm saying sometimes there is even more sipuk after you dig there.
Oh yeah, okay, beside it, yeah.
For me, for instance, I find it very hard to study Gemara. Gemara for me is sometimes makes me lose
Understood, yeah.
it's just. But once I'm in it and once I start seeing the results of me studying it, it becomes so much more.
Okay. So
There's in it's like, I don't know, a form of good masochism in a way. Like enjoying the heart.
okay, but all we're saying here, just that's going kind of off topic, but just the point is that he's just trying to say to you that it doesn't feel like Avodas Hashem is something close to us. And what he says is, you're right. This statement is talking about the ability to serve God, not the ability to feel aligned with God. And that accounts for the order. He says a strange order. He says, Kikoi v'lecha davar ma'od, the thing is very close to you. Beficha, in your mouth. Levavacha, in your heart. La'asoisoi, to do it. What he's explaining is that your ability to do avodas Hashem is something that is close to you. That's it. To feel connected to the Ribono Shel Olam, to feel in sync and aligned with Hashem, that isn't Karov Alecha Davar Ma'od. That's not so close. But to actually do what he wants, that's very close. He said, "L'kol adam asher yesh lo moyach b'kad kadoi." If he has a brain in his head, he can do the right thing, and that is just that in my world. Is just that releases all the pressure of what I had put on me as a Hasidic about Tshuva, where everybody is. It's about loving God, and it's about all the emotion. It's about the experience. It's about all this stuff, and the experiences that you have that are worth noting are like, to say they're few and far between. To say they're few and far between is a complete overstatement. So you feel at the end when you put the dagesh on the experience that you're having in your avodas Hashem, you end up walking away feeling very chasser. The Rebbe flips it all around and he says, no, that's okay. The real avodah is serving the Ribono Shel Olam in thought, speech, and action, and that's close to us. And now that helps you understand that you can immediately translate into a relationship with your wife, if you're married, whatever, that a lot of the times you don't feel in sync with her bichlal. You can feel the opposite for a long time. But that again, the ikka way of getting back in sync is by service. Is by service. So he's explaining here, this is the foundation of the entire Tanya, that it's not close to you to feel, to have your heart aligned with Ratzon Hashem. That's not close, that's a lot of work. But to act correctly, that is completely that's available. And that is such a relief when you realize that. So you're saying that the fact that I want to do all this other stuff and that I'm not really into my avodas Hashem, you're saying that's normal and okay? And you're like, that's normal and okay. And if you play the rules of this and you go along with what he's saying, you'll see that will start to slowly evolve in you, and you will actually start to feel more aligned with him. But that's not what he's saying over here. He's just saying that this statement in the Torah is basically saying that for you are able to generate enough emotion that you just do it. And that is he calls that kol ha'adam. What's the word he says here? V'zeh kol ha'adam ki hayam la'asoisam kasiv. Shayom hu olam hamayis dafka lamacha is to be kabul schar. That's kol ha'adam. Do you hear how much of a relief that is? Do you see how that's kind of flipped everything over especially from the Hasidische Welt of like one day we'll have this thing. You're going to have these experiences one day, and again, that's one of the things why kind of why I really picked you up on what you said about Morgenstern is because, again, that's what people are thinking. They're seeing him with his experiences in the Olamas or whatever it is, yeah? And we're thinking, well, that's Yiddishkeit. And that's not what the Balatanya is. That's not how the Balatanya describes Yiddishkeit. Yiddishkeit is mamish doing the mitzvahs. And I'll just tell you a private story that just happened just now, which is really, really on the nail here, is that having learned this and really becoming really kind of embody it, or trying to embody it anyway, what did I want to do at the chasna? Because at the chasna, yeah, you've got very deep emotions available, and l'choyla standing on the chuppah with your son and all this kind of stuff, yeah, your first child, you would imagine that there'd be a lot of experiences available, yeah? So I wasn't getting sucked into that. I decided I was going to be the wedding planner. I'm going to make sure, I want to get my hands dirty, so to speak, with the mitzvah. I want to make sure the candles are in the right place. I want to make sure the ksuba's in the right place. I want to make sure there's wine. I want to make sure that the schedule is running and the band. And so I'm I'm running around, like, so to speak, with my hands asuk in the mitzvah mamash. Yeah? My wife went the other direction, and she was listening to these shirim from a certain Rebbe, and like trying to, with all these guided meditations and all these kinds of things, yeah? And at the end of the wedding, yeah, my wife felt, kind of whack, wow. Like she had all these, deep thoughts and what it was going to be like, and walking into the chuppah and walking around him under the chuppah and, at the bedekah and all this kind of stuff, yeah? And it wasn't like that, Bichlal. It wasn't like that. And she felt that she had a difficult experience, yeah? On the other hand, I ended actually having some very deep ruchnis experiences, but that wasn't the point. Again, what's in your hands is to take the mitzvah seriously. That's really in your hands. You happen why I'm like going on about this? Because that's so available, and that's the whole sefer. The Tanya's based on this pasuk. La asoisoi. Yeah, you want all the experiences, so that's l'macha. B'chinas kibuscha. Okay. But when you put the dagesh on you miss out on everything. You miss out on everything. When the dagesh is on the experience, then you most of the times you don't have the experience anyway, yeah? And then you just end up as like, in a narcissistic kind of way, trying to chase the experience and have some experience. So it becomes no avoider. There's no avoider there. And all the avoiders is just, I'm going to put more in because I want to have the experience, as opposed to, no, I just want the mitzvah to take place in the most profound way that I can have it take place. And then it comes out anyway as a kind of, paradoxically, that you genuinely you can end up having deep experiences, but that's just another chelik of the mitzvah you're offering to the Boinah Shalom. That's not what you're chasing. That's the essence of the Tanya. And for our generation, where we are so fragmented and distracted, I can't think of a more important message. Just take the mitzvah, the halachas of the mitzvah really seriously. Learn about everything. Get deep, man. Go really deep. But don't chase stop chasing the experience. Stop chasing the inner world. That will come eventually, and even if it doesn't come, it might not come, yeah? But that is an outgrowth of the avoider. And then if you want to plug that into our human relationships with our wife especially, is that it's the exact same idea. People are getting eaten up by, I just don't love her anymore, or I don't even like her. And it's like, people get eaten up by these feelings of separation, of disconnectedness, etc. Yeah? Whereas if you let go of that, I'm not saying there isn't a time and a place for divorce, yeah? Very rarely there is. But if you let go of that and you concentrate on la asoisoi, yeah, on the service, you will anyway start seeing things come aligned, but that's not the point. Just shift your mind from my inner world to like lemaisa, what is chalomi? What is my chiyuv here? And that's always la asoisoi. That's machshavati b'maisa. And that, he says, the Rebbe says, you have available to you, always. As long as you have a brain in your head, you have the ability to do the mitzvah in the most b'shleimistic way, in the most perfect way, etc. Okay, so he now comes back and kind of asks a question, because he says, Moich sholet ala leiv. Yeah, we've said many times that means that you have the ability to act accordingly. When it says Moich sholet ala leiv, it doesn't mean that you can generate emotions in your heart. It means you can access that part of your heart that you need to do stuff. Yeah, which is a much more external part of the heart than actually feeling, having real emotions towards something. Yeah. So then what about Rishayim, who are B'Rishus Libam? They don't have Moich sholet ala leiv. In fact, maybe one of the definitions, or maybe the definition of a Rasha, is that his Moich isn't sholet ala leiv.
Of course it is.
Huh?
It's just that Moch decides to do different stuff.
A Moich is just a machine. A Moich is just a calculator. So where does the selfishness come from?
They calculated that it's better for them to do something for them at the cost of other people.
They didn't calculate that. They felt that. They felt that, they wanted that, and that now generates thoughts that bring that. The mind is just it's just objective. The seichel is objective, yeah? The question is who's driving the seichel. That's by the Rasha, the heart, which is selfish, is driving the seichel. So you're right, they're using their mind in a very selfish way, but it's because it's being driven by their selfish heart. Whereas the tzaddik, yeah, or even in this case the Beinoni, he's using his mind to control his heart. By the Rishayim, their heart is controlling their mind. You with me? It's like we said before, it's the definition of two houses, yeah? You have the holy house, where the parents are educating the children, and then you have the unholy house, where the children are being spoiled, meaning they're manipulating the parents. They're using the kalim of the parents, their money, their influence, their whatever, yeah, to fulfill their own selfish purposes. That's a Rasha. So that's how he describes a Rasha. It says Shvishayim heim b'reshus libam, v'ein libam b'reshus sam klal. That the Rishayim are in the reshus of their heart. Selfishness only takes place at the level of, on this, the way we're talking about now, on the level of heart, on the level of emotions. Das is where the self is born. Yeah, this concept of I is born. Okay, and das is the mamutza between seichel and midas. So that's why. Well, getting into that, yeah, das divides out into Ava and Yira. That's where your sense of self takes root. So, intellect is completely objective, meaning how much of you is there in this? 2 + 2 = 4. How involved in that are you? Nothing. 100 years after you're gone, yeah, 2 + 2 is always going to equal 4, yeah, and it equaled 4 before you popped out into this world as well, yeah. There's nothing subjective. There's no concept of me in seichel. Whereas my emotions, my love for my child, yeah, my love for my brother, that's 100% subjective. That's the ikka difference. One of the ikka differences, maybe the ikka difference between seichel and midas, is that seichel is completely objective. Midas are completely subjective. That's where the I is. The I is in the midas. The question is, which way does it work? Is it from up down? Yeah, that's called tzidkus. Or is it from down up? That's called rishus. So I have a question for everybody. Yeah, why is a Rasha called mason? Kriya mason b'chayehem. Why is a Rasha called a mace? You've heard that before, yeah? Rishayim are called mason b'chayehem. Everyone's heard that idea, yeah? Why is it that a Rasha is called a mace?
If there's no because of Bechira, are you really alive?
Yeah.
In the sense that you give up their Bechira.
That's exactly the answer. But Bechira this is understand Bechira in the way that we've explained Bechira over the past few weeks, which is a little different to the regular way that I learned it, is that Bechira is not, I have a choice between two different yogurts, yeah, or between a rugelach and a brown, a brown roll, yeah. That's not Bechira. That is Bechira. That's not what we call Bechira Chofshis. Okay, Bechira means you make a cheshbon. So that would also be if you decide to do mitzvahs because you don't want to go to Gehenna, yeah. That's a human cheshbon. Just like you decide to eat the brown bread as opposed to the white bread because of the health benefits, you decide to do the mitzvah because you don't want to go to Gehenna, you're using your seichel. That kind of seichel is available to all human beings and even to animals in a certain extent, not as complex and as refined as it is by humans. What we defined as Bechira Chofshis is one experience, is when the ratzon of your nefesh elokis, the ratzon of your neshama, burns through or is expressed at the expense of the nefesh habahamis, meaning your own sense of self gets put to the side, and your neshama expresses herself anyhow. You with me? That's how we spent a lot of time explaining that, yeah. And that's exactly the point. That if a person, and then again, so it could be the only way you can actually explain that and see it is when your humanity wants to do something not good. It wants to do the Aveira or not the mitzvah, and the neshama burns through, and you do it anyway. But even if you've trained yourself, like for example, I don't have any desire whatsoever to eat basar v'cholav. Yeah? I wouldn't eat basar v'cholav. It would make me feel sick. I wouldn't be able to do it. I'd throw up. Yeah? So what that means that I don't have bechira. When I don't eat basar v'cholav, there's no bechira working through. There could still be that my nefesh elokis is still shining through, just in this point you wouldn't see it because it's not a steer to my nefesh bahamis. My nefesh bahamis won't eat basar v'cholav. He's a nice frum. He's in that department. He's frum. Yeah. So we're not saying that bechira is only when the nefesh elokis, the neshama, trumps the goof. If you've worked long enough on the goof and the goof has become somewhat refined, it could be that the goof is in line with the neshama, and that would still be nefesh. That would still be bechira chofshis. That's an expression of the Rebbeinu Shalom into His world. Yeah. If that's not Elokim Chaim, yeah, Hashem is Chai. God is Chaim. If the person isn't living in that level where the neshama is expressing herself into the world, well, then it's just an empty kli. It's just the kalim of the world, which are just doimem. It's all doimem. Everything's doimem. If you take the chiyas out of me, yeah, it's a moshul for the real chiyas, which is the Shem's chiyas. The fact that I'm in the world, that I'm a human being moving and etc. Yeah. If you take the chiyas out of me, then what happens is this 80 odd kilo of flesh just drops to the floor and rots away. So a person who gives up expressing the Rebbeinu Shalom into the world, he's just become graphics of the world. He's just like a tree. He may be even worse. He's called mace because the only chiyas is the Elokim Chaim. That's what life is. Life is Hashem. So when we give up, when Bechira Chofshis shines through us, that is a gilui of the Rebbeinu Shalom in this world, and that's called Chaim. When I'm living according to my humanity, according to my humankite, according to my created part, where's the Rebbeinu Shalom in that? If you're just, and it could be you're not even doing Aveiros. If you're just running along with the plan of the world on a natural level, where's the Rebbeinu Shalom? The Rebbeinu Shalom is contained in one thing, in Torah. That's the Kli chemda. That's where He is. Yeah, that's the Tayyad mitzvahs. If there aren't mitzvahs, you can feel whatever you want, yeah? I told you what happened in by Shlomo Katz on Shana Rabbah. Told you that story? No? So was you were there for Shana Rabbah? Yeah? It was Mamash Moedik, yeah? And you've got Shlomo Katz with the big rum coal around the massive, big shul, stuffed full with people, singing, Mamash close, everyone's with the Arba Minim, yeah? And it was very, wow, what an experience, yeah? Really choshev, really, a real experience, yeah? So one of the things at Arba Minim, more so than the other mitzvahs, is it's like the tefillin, it's like it's all over you, yeah? And but Arba Minim, you're like holding it in your hand. You're like, this is the mitzvah. That's it, right in front of you. That's the mitzvah, yeah? If you change the esrog into the other direction, or you take out one of these or do that, yeah, the mitzvah's gone. Yeah, so you're holding the mitzvah in your hand, mamash. So I remember I'm sitting there with the Arba Minim pushed up against my forehead, yeah? And I'm listening to the music, and I'm being swayed by everyone's together, swaying very, very deep, very, very special, yeah? And then it flicked into my mind, how different would you be feeling if you weren't holding the Arba Minim? Look at the matzav, yeah? You need the Arba Minim to be feeling this? I was like, no, not at all. In fact, as a kid, I know I've been to raves and stuff where there was feelings of such, maybe you've had these experiences, yeah, where it was like, wow, this is like God, yeah, and everyone feels the same thing, and then the next morning, like everyone's like, that was unbelievable, and it was really unbelievable at the time, yeah. But how godly was it? With the shiksa next to you, and you're half, you're all drunk with the coke and ecstasy and the acid flying around yourself, yeah, and you can't even speak, and there was God, he was right there, yeah, with a cigarette in your mouth and a beer, and yeah,
Maybe even on Shabbos.
what?
Maybe even on Shabbos.
Okay. So yeah, maybe you're not sure exactly. So yeah, exactly.
Mine's the ecstasy and coke.
Okay. Yeah, we've been there. So I was in my mind. I was like, this is a really nice situation. You got Shlomo Katz singing beautifully. Everyone's mamash going like this, and it's really lovely. Let's just let go of the Arba Minim. What's the difference? And I was like, shut up, what are you talking about? The Arba Minim, the only reason why this experience has got any relevance and is heilig in any way is because of the Arba Minim that I'm holding. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go into the experience and feel the whole thing, or I want to be makasha myself to the Arba Minim. I moved my mind onto the Arba Minim, and not that I let go of the experience, I was having the experience, but the experience isn't something unto itself. You with me? That's where the Rebbeinu Shalom is there by the Arba Minim. The only reason why he's there by the experience is because of the Arba Minim. But we feel that we're feeling that, I've done all the drugs. I know how it feels. I've had the infinite, merged with infinity, and the whole universe existed in me, and everyone was a cell in my body, and I was completely echad yachad miyuchad with everyone, yeah? And etc., etc. Nice, lovely, great, enjoy. Yeah? Where's its kesher to mitzvah? You with me?
I had this question very strongly a Rosh Hashanah and a half ago, like a year and a half ago on Rosh Hashanah.
Say louder, say louder.
On Rosh Hashanah, like 2 Rosh Hashanahs ago, like a year and a half ago, basically, I had this very strong question. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Everyone was singing beautifully, and I was just thinking, like, if this was a random day and we were singing the same songs, and the kids were singing and everything was, like with. Basically, with the experience.
Do you have the same question? What I'm saying?
Yeah,
and it probably would. And in fact, the halacha says by Shabbos, if you dress up in big day Shabbos, and you'll have an experience of Shabbos. If you forgot what day Shabbos is, you'll start to be able to experience Shabbos by doing all the external stuff. It's just trying to impress upon you the thing that we're all mamash running after is the wrong thing. We should be running after mitzvah. That's what we're trying to be running after. You should be running after Arba Minim. You should be working out the halachas of the Arba Minim. That's first things for. I'm not saying you have to work out every different size of esrog and get involved in all the, get completely involved in the kalim of the mitzvah and miss out panemias. I'm not saying that. But first things first is remember that all of this stuff is from the mitzvah. So now by the tzaddik, that is the tzaddik, that the mitzvah overwhelms him, and that's where the Ribbono Shel Olam is, and that is the gilui of the Ribbono Shel Olam in this world. That's when the Ribbono Shel Olam enters into this world. You want to bring him more into the world, You want to bring more things to him, then get the personality and the emotions also involved. But first things first is the most basic gedarim of the mitzvah, So the Rishoyim are called Mesim because Hashem is Chai. This world is a mace. So so Bechira is when the Yid is attached to the mitzvah, when the mitzvah overwhelms his own personal agenda, and that's called Chaim, Elokim Chaim. So the Rishayim are called Mesim, Afilu B'chayehem, because that isn't happening by them. They're just a part of they're a part of creation. Creation is mace. Why? Because you've got the Arba Olamas, Atzilas Bri, Yitzira, Asiya. Okay? The world of Bria is called the Kisei Kavod. It's the Kisei. The world of Atzilas is the Kavod. That's Hashem's Kavod. So Bria, the Kisei Kavod, is already not him. I know Hashem Echad, I know Mevado, Yishma Yisrael, v'chulei, but understanding it on this bechina, Bria is already the Kisei Kavod. The Kavod is the Ribbono Shel Olam. You can't separate the Kavod from Hashem, just like you can't separate the rays of light from the sun itself. It's mamash. But when you're talking about the Kisei Kavod, you're already talking about now something separate from the Ribbono Shel Olam. And then the what's Olam? What's the base of Mikdash called? Hadam Raglov, his footstool. So the covered is the tsura of the Adam on the throne.
Doesn't it say the Torah says the whole earth is Ve'aretz Adam Raglav?
Say that.
The whole earth is Adam Raglav.
Again, don't get Bechinas mixed up. But anyway, according to that, it's the same idea. It's Malay Kvoidoi. But it's Malay Kvoidoi. Just like the goof is Malay your nefesh. But there's a chiluk between your nefesh and the goof. That's what we're trying to say here. That's the exact point. So the world is a mace. The world is a mace. What brings the world to life is the Ribbono Shel Olam. So the moshel for it is the energy of life. But that's still part of the world. That's just a moshel. So we see that when my life force is taken from my goof falls on the floor like a mace. So even though the world looks like it's functioning and running, etc., that's just a moshel. The real chiyus is the Ribbono Shel Olam coming through into the world by derech mitzvah. That's how the Ribbono Shel Olam comes into the world, derech mitzvah. So the Rishonim are called mace in their life because they don't have that experience. Their humanity, it's not correct to say their goof. Their humanity has become so loud that Hashem doesn't get to express himself through them. And that's what he says here to take you to the next part of this. Tshuva Tatar. So now, what is it? Like, why is it that there's one guy? What's the difference? You could answer this question in so many ways, I'm going to not even ask the question, What we're about to explain here is the difference between a tzaddik and a rasha. And this is so profound, is that the rasha has identified with his humanity. The tzaddik is identified with reality. Let's call that Hashem. Yeah? The tzaddik is identified with reality. I don't want to say he's identified with the Shem, because to say he's identified with God, that's there's a lot of people who are identified with an image of God that they've created in their mind, and they become very dangerous, horrible people. Yeah? The tzaddik is identified with reality, and the Rasha is identified with his humanity. Does that make sense to people? Meaning that
reality being not his reality.
Reality being God.
The reality.
Being Hashem. What we really mean when we're talking about Hashem, not a picture of God, that a lot of people have in their mind. He's actually identified with reality, and he's not identified with his humanity. Now, what's the essence of your humanity?
Selfishness.
One word.
Selfishness. Ego.
What's the pneumius of that?
Selfishness.
What's the pneumius of selfishness? Why can a human being be selfish?
Animal instinct, survival instinct.
The eye.
Getting there, getting closer.
Nefesh HaBahamis.
Pleasure. Oineg. That's what makes you separate from God, is that you have your own independent sense of pleasure. And it's not aligned with God's sense of pleasure. Now, very few people ascend from that level, like maybe Moshe and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, David and Melech ascended from that level where their pleasure actually, that's called a tzaddik gamur, that the essence of their humanity, which was pleasure, became godly pleasure. That's very, very unique. Very, very few people in all of history have ever had that. Yeah, that's called a tzaddik gamur. Yeah, the regular tzaddik that we're talking about is a person who has a sense of pleasure, but it's lo echpat lo. Doesn't care.
He doesn't chase it.
Even he wouldn't, like I've said this before, if a tzaddik is sitting in an uncomfortable chair, and there was a comfortable chair next to him, and it wouldn't benefit his avodas Hashem in any way, it wouldn't cross his mind to go and sit in the comfortable chair. You with me? His own sense of pleasure, or her own sense of pleasure, is so irrelevant to them. Would he or she appreciate sitting in the comfortable chair? Yeah, because they have a sense of pleasure, but it doesn't mean anything to them. It's not a man da'ama. Now, Masha'ain Kain, a Rasha. What does a Rasha do? I will put you out because of my sense of pleasure. That's exactly a Rasha. That is what a Rasha is. The ultimate level of Rasha I always give is Ted Bundy in Machshamoy, like a rapist, psychotic murderer. He was a Rasha, and he was also a sadist. So he's a psychopath, a narcissist, and a sadist. So you put all of those things together. Sadist means he gets pleasure from hurting people. Most normal human beings don't get pleasure from hurting people. So I wouldn't, me hurting you, if I was a big Rasha, according to how I am, I wouldn't do that. I might try and cheat you out of something or etc. But when your pleasure becomes hurting someone, chas v'shalom, a real Rasha, my pleasure is so real to me that I will hurt you for my pleasure. Whereas a real tzaddik is, my pleasure is so irrelevant to me that I won't even pick myself up and sit in the chair next to me, because it just doesn't make a difference. Why would I spend 2 seconds of my life doing that?
So what about all the Rebbes?
Is that clear? Does everyone get that?
What about all the Rebbes that look so royal? They have all this.
That's fine. It's not a stira. That's not a stira. The point would be that they don't care. The minute that becomes something important to them, you wouldn't imagine,
Well, I think it's not them that they care, it's their Hasidim.
The what?
It's a lot of times it's not them that do that. It's their Hasidim that insist on it.
And they might much prefer a much more posher thing, a much more posher chair, a much more posher car. They might a much more posher shul. Maybe, I don't know, but it's not a stira b'chlal. It's all just chetzonius pneumius.
Doesn't God want us to enjoy it?
No?
Doesn't God want us to enjoy this world?
If you're a normal human being, I'm saying that the tzaddik, it's not that he doesn't enjoy the world, his pleasure isn't choshev to him. It's about what I have to do. And you'll see that by elevated human beings. By elevated human beings, like what's the difference between a lot of these, high-level athletes or big CEOs or whatever, yeah? Is the truth is they're aiming for a higher pleasure, maybe, yeah? Okay. But the point is they're able to put aside their immediate pleasure. Mm-hmm. Their pleasure's not choshev to them. Whereas the lower people, they're just guided by their pleasure. That's where they're, yeah. So according to this is the best definition I know of tzaddik and rasha, is that the tzaddik wouldn't put himself out for his own pleasure. A rasha would put you out for his own pleasure.
Wouldn't put himself out.
He wouldn't. It's not part of his cheshbon. Like, why do you do stuff?
Why do I do stuff?
Yeah, what makes you do stuff?
Feels good.
I said because of oneg and ratzon.
You have responsibilities, and then there's pleasure as well, yeah? So you're not married yet soon, B'ezrat Hashem, and you have children as well, B'ezrat Hashem, yeah? That's a responsibility that you have to take care of a lot of the times
I have responsibility to take care of myself so I can get married.
Is it okay? But you've got responsibility. The minute you're bar mitzvah, you have responsibilities to do Torah mitzvahs. Yeah, but now, what's guiding me now? Is it my shlichus, my responsibility to serve Hashem, or is it my own pleasure? Now we're really getting into where you're holding. So a lot of people, I've met elevated people. I'm sorry, going back to this story because I need to emphasize this so much. Is I've met elevated people, yeah, much more like me. I like Coca-Cola. Yeah, if you were to offer me a $500 bottle of wine and a glass Coke, yeah, or a very expensive whiskey, a glass Coke, I'll take the glass Coke.
Me too.
What?
Me too.
Yeah, that's you know.
Not a chance.
What?
Not a chance.
Yes, I'm not. Music, in regards to music, yeah, I don't particularly care about classical music. I'm much, I'm a posher guy. You know, I'm not an elevated human being. Yeah. You get people who are much more elevated. Yeah. When I was a kid, it was just there was no learning. There was no pleasure from wisdom or from giving or loving or anything. It was just tivers, mamash. So I've met people who are very elevated human beings who aren't tivedic in a sense, but their whole world is completely about their own pleasure. That's again what I'm trying to point out to you again is these experiences are available to human beings. You can have deep ruchniistic experiences, yeah? The question is, again, is it about you or is it about God? That's the definition of tzaddik v'rasha. If you're being guided by your own pleasure, then it just so happens that you're actually in a worse position. Because if a guy's like a grob, yeah, like me, who likes kugel and sugar, yeah, then you're never going to be deluded into thinking when you act in a natural way. You're not going to be deluded into thinking that you're doing the right thing. Yeah, obviously God doesn't want you to fress on kugel and eat sugar. So you've got a good chance of actually putting yourself together. Whereas if you're a much more elevated human being and you're into prayer and meditation and all these kinds of things, yeah, then you can really be deluded into, and learning as well, you could be really deluded into thinking that you're mamash in line when you're just caught up in your own pleasure. You with me? It's more dangerous. You're in a disadvantage in a sense. You're at a disadvantage in a sense.
What about the shita that Torah Lishma is when you're learning Torah and you're actually getting pleasure from it, and that because you have such a drive to learn Torah, and that is the pleasure of Hashem.
And then you might very well get pleasure from it, but that becomes like kind of irrelevant to you. In fact, you want the pleasure from the learning. Why? Because now you can give him your pleasure. Now you're giving him your pleasure. So it makes sense to have pleasure in Torah and mitzvahs because now you're giving him the essence of who you are. You've actually converted, so to speak, the essence of your humanity into something more godly. So when you're enjoying the avodas Hashem, you're not only just serving him on that level, you're now serving him deeper. You're giving him also the essence of your humanity because you're now enjoying it. You with me? But you're not doing it for that purpose. That's the point. Is that clear?
So you're saying that it's a byproduct, not the end goal.
It's a byproduct, meaning it's another part of the gift you're giving to the Rebbeinu Shalom. When you do a mitzvah for the Rebbeinu Shalom, you're giving him a gift. Yeah, you're doing what he wants. Now, when you get your emotions involved in it, you're giving him more. Yeah? When you get your seichel involved in it, you're giving him more. When you get your pleasure deeply involved in it, then you're giving him even more. That's the ultimate thing you can give him. But you're not doing it for your pleasure. That's the point. That is the level of a man who has separated himself, who has extracted himself from his sense of pleasure. And now it's not part of the equation. You with me? So go back. What's a Russia? A Russia is a person who has identified with his pleasure. That's with the essence of his humanity. When I said a Russia is someone who identified with humanity, with his humanity, and a tzaddik is identified with reality. Yeah, when we talk about humanity, we're really talking about pleasure, his sense of independent pleasure. Now, because he's identified with that, identification means you merge with it. That's the opposite of the tzaddik who has extracted himself from the pleasure. He's not identified with his pleasure. He has the pleasure. And if you were to slip the candy into his mouth, he'd enjoy it, he'd appreciate it, yeah? But it's not part of the equation. He doesn't look at it as... he's not identified with it, yeah?
If I say I want to turn my will over to Hashem, is that less than I want to turn my pleasure over to Hashem?
Will and pleasure are will is the chetzonius of pleasure. What you have pleasure, what pleasures you, or what is your pleasure, expresses itself as what you want. So will is actually, in the way you're talking about rotzon, like not that you want to eat a piece of chocolate, like the shoresh of rotzon, which is really your will to live, because pleasure. This is maybe the deepest thing that I know. Pleasure is life. So your will to live is actually a gilui of that life is intrinsically pleasurable. It's not fair to say that. Pleasure is life. Life is pleasure. So all our attempts to experience pleasure could be called our attempts to experience life. To be alive. And that's why we can't give up our life. So when we're talking about Ratzon, which is above Seichel, yeah, we're talking about your will to live. We're not talking about your will to eat chocolate.
What about the people that Kiddush Hashem, that gave over their life for Kaddish Hashem?
That's what we've been speaking about. That's called B'rcher Chofshis, when the will of the neshama shines through and burns up the will and the pleasure of the Nefesh Bahamis. Because the Nefesh Bahamis, his pleasure is to continue to live. He wants life. That's why everybody wants to live. Yeah, because it's pleasure. And that is what you are. When you strip away all of the graphics, yeah, all you are is just a point of pleasure. Everything else is just making it look like it's just... Do you understand what I'm saying? This whole world, and it's complete, it's, what it looks like, is just a klipa over what you really are, which is just a nakuda of pleasure, which is a nakuda. Why is it called a nakuda? Yeah? A point. Because a point has no mamashas to it. A point isn't a little circle. A point is a coordinate. So it doesn't have any mass. A line has length, yeah? A line also doesn't have mass. And then a three-dimensional, whatever. But a nakuda is not... So you're a nakuda of pleasure. But you're not really, as a Jew, you're not. As a Jew, there's a nakuda of pleasure, and then there's the Pintele Yid, which is a nakuda of reality, a nakuda of Hashem. So now what do you choose? Do you realize that we've just stripped everything, we've stripped away all the graphics? At this point, there's no graphics. Everything is a choice between a nakuda of pleasure of human pleasure or reality itself. That's it. You with me? Everything you do wrong is because you identified with that little point of reality, that little point of non-reality, that little point of your own personal pleasure. You with me? Everything you do wrong is because of that. So we get caught up in, I need to stop looking at this, and I need to stop saying that, and I need to stop doing this, and I need to stop going there.
Is personal pleasure intrinsically wrong?
Personal pleasure is intrinsically false. To say it's intrinsically wrong, it's intrinsically false, meaning, do you agree with this statement? Ani Hashem Elokeichem Emes. Yeah? So then what's sheker? Everything else. That's what's called Sitra Achra. Yeah, you have Hashem, and then everything else, that's what's called Sitra Achra. It's just everything else. If that isn't infused, with Rabbanu Shalom,
Oneg part of Hashem also? Isn't Oneg also part of Hashem? I mean, Hashem.
that's like saying is the ego part of Hashem. Alibid Emes, ultimately, maybe.
Part of Hashem. They were made in a way.
We could argue. You could. Yeah, that's very true. I said. I thought of a nice acronym for ego. People said edging God out. You've heard that before, yeah? So I think a much more profound one, which is basically the answer to you, is elokus gone off. That's really ego. It's in truth what you're saying. It is the very essence of that. There's a machlokes in if the nefesh Bahamis has an essence or not. If it's just a halal, or if it's like it was the original machlokes about if kapshutoi, if it's tzimtzum kapshutoi or lo kapshutoi, if there's actually a halal, or if really he's the substrata of the halal. Yeah, whatever. Like so, but our avoider is trying to ascend beyond our own personal sense of pleasure.
The thing is, okay, I accept that. Okay, let's say I accept that. But the thing is
but wait. Let me add to that. That doesn't mean you don't have pleasure. If you save pleasure for Shabbos, you're being mekadesh the pleasure. That's the point of. That's why that separates the Jew from the human. Is Shabbos, because that is the offering of your pleasure to Rabbanu Shalom.
Does that mean so during the week you're not allowed to have any personal pleasure?
No, you can have personal pleasure if it's in context of avodas Hashem.
The thing is,
meaning, are you going to go nuts if you don't eat that? If you don't eat that cake, yeah, are you going to have trouble relating to people as a mensch? Are you going to be able to say Kriya Shema? Are you going to slump around and get involved in looking at bad stuff on the computer? Then you're drafting your pleasure. Yeah, to serve the Rabbanu Shalom.
Sometimes I also get a better connection from enjoying it.
You get what?
I get better. For instance, okay, I'll give you an example. But maybe this is also a form of I don't know. So we have in our Beit Chabad we have Fabrengen every week. Okay,
Fabrengen, yeah,
every week, and every week somebody else organizes it, and we go to someone else's house and they cook. Okay, and there's this whole thing where people try to really cook good food. Okay, like very delicious food every week, and every week we come and there's
say and it's very because I want to finish.
Okay, it's very pleasurable.
Yeah,
and the people who cook, they want you to enjoy the food they make. They want you to say, "Wow, this is good food. I really enjoyed myself."
Good.
And so that comes. The fact that I can compliment them comes out of my personal pleasure.
Again, the tzaddik would also enjoy eating that. Okay. It's just he doesn't. It's not. He wouldn't go there specifically for that. It's not even ma'akev. It's just not a thing to him. That's like when he's there. I said he will enjoy it. He'll appreciate it. It'll taste good. He gets pleasure from it. Yeah, and he'll say thank you. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't drive him because he's not identified with his pleasure. This is the point, and this is what I want to explain to you now. That is when a man is identified with his pleasure. This is the point. Not that you have pleasure, is that you're identified with pleasure. Meaning, when you're identified with it, you don't know where you end and it begins. A man who's identified with his football club, yeah, you come and tell him that his team won, he's jumping up and down. You tell him that his team lost, he's on the floor crying, yeah? And you say to him, like, what are you... They don't even know who you are. I'll go and speak to any of the players on the team, they have no idea who you are. Yeah, and you're jumping up and down with them and just crying with them, yeah? because his sense of self has been merged with that team. That's the point. So I look at that and I think that's ridiculous. Why? Because I'm not identified with the team. So I'm like, why are you taking this personally? That's the point.
But you can also say, I mean, it also creates a connection between people. It's what also makes you happy. It's not just my personal pleasure. It's the fact that I'm being happy with other people who also like this team.
So maybe you're already edging into just try and understand, because we could. This is the foundation of everything. So we go in all different directions.
I'm getting this vision of this tzaddik sitting in his home all day, studying Torah and not wanting to, enjoy anything. That's the vision I'm getting.
No, he's out there. The tzaddik could be out there in a very, very profound way. He could be going. I went with my kids. Yeah, I'm not a tzaddik, but I went with my kids to America. I took my two oldest boys to Los Angeles for over 2 weeks. Yeah, and we had a blast. We went to Six Flags with the Rebbe Pass. Yeah, we went skydiving, we went shooting, we went go-karting, we ate lovely food dishes.
Amazing world.
And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed it so much. Would I have gone there without my boys? Would I have done that? Would I have invested 16 days into that pleasure? Of course not. Because my pleasure isn't so. But there's a lot of people in the world who could do that. That's what I'm trying to say to you. You become amazing. You become someone who everyone wants to be with. When your pleasure stops being so important to you, you become the person that everybody's magnetically drawn to. Mamash. Nothing bothers you anymore, except things that are real that should bother you, like people not doing what they're meant to be doing. I should probably wake them up. So we're not, don't you hear what I'm saying? Yeah, the guy's not a wet fish at all. Yeah, the tzaddik is out there. Again, he could be having a lot of pleasure, but it's not driving him. What's driving him is avodas Hashem. What's driving him is reality. Yeah, that's the point. So now that is called that the lave becomes mutumtam. Yeah, like a rock, like an even. When a person identifies with his pleasure, that is that the lave becomes like a stone, becomes hard, it ossifies. How do you get out of that? That's called shvir salev. Shvir salev is the process of disidentification with your pleasure. Shvir salev is a good example of a person who has shvir salev, is a young child who sees his parents get divorced. Lo aleinu, Rahman al-Islam. If a kid sees a young child of 8 to 10 sees his parents get divorced, then the feeling that he has is a feeling of shvir salev, meaning his whole identity was bound up in his parents' relationship. That relationship dissolves. His identity has dissolved. That's called shvir salev, according to how I've learned it from Rav Manis, according to Tanya. Now, that's a good example, What about when you have, like, I was identified years ago as a top level photographer, I'm like spitz photographer, and I meet a guy who's a better photographer than me. How does that feel?
It sucks.
It sucks, So sucks means shvir salev.
You feel like you can appreciate it more.
That would be if you weren't identified with being a good photographer. If you're identified with your koiches as a good photographer, when you meet a better photographer than you, that's called shvir salev. That feeling that you're called it sucks is that's called a fragmentation of ego, a fragmentation of your identity. You with me? That's shvir salev. So now he says here, this really needs a lot of time. He tells you here that you are meant to, you should create shvir salev by being mizboinen on your aveiros. He's talking to the Russia here. He's helping the Russia break out of his egocentricness. Over here he says you need to concentrate on your aveiros. Much later, not much later on, chapter Kavav, he says an amazing thing. Kavav. Actually, yeah. Tzrich kvias item v'shasa koisha. He has to make an appointed time. Yeah, b'yishuv das lisboinein b'gudulus Hashem asher chotoloi. This is talking to the Beinoni, the elevated mensch. What's true for the elevated mensch? It's not thinking about your aveiras, thinking about who you were choite against. The Russia, he says, Mizalev nafshay al chotov, on your aveiras. It's a very deep chiluk there, yeah? The Beinoni is not so identified with himself. Yeah, that's not really his problem where he's saying that in the Tanya here. So he's trying to conceptualize not what he did wrong, but by who was wronged. Like we said, a guy who says something horrible to his wife, yeah, she storms out. And he's sitting there thinking, I can't believe what an idiot I am. I can't believe how low I've fallen. I should be so much better than this, yeah? That's a Russia doing tshuva. A Beinoni doing tshuva is a guy sitting there thinking, wow, my wife deserves so much more than this. She really doesn't. She really shouldn't have to go through this. That's real tshuva, yeah? So we're talking about a guy who's not in that, he's not holding there. So the Rebbe says, thinking about your aveiras will knock you off your perch about thinking about how whatever you are, yeah? And that is the segula to break this, to break the ego, if you want to use, Lashon of 2025, to break this identification with sense of pleasure, which is what really ego is in its most essential form. So that's called, when a person hasn't done that and is identified with a sense of pleasure, that's called Galus Shechina. Why? That's called a Maise Edom. And when a person is doing things that are wrong, then that means that the hay of his name, the hay of Hashem's name, which in the picture of a mensch, you have the yud and the hay and the vav and the hay, yeah? The yud is connected, let's say, ratzon, yeah? Chochmah, whatever. Then the hay, the upper hay is seichel, the vav is midus, and the lower hay is malchus, which is behavior, thought, speech, and action. When a person's actions are not in alignment, yeah, with Hashem's mitzvahs, Hashem is having his expression stifled. Hashem is feeling stifled because that's, again, we've said this before, nachas ruach. Nachas ruach means that the ruach, yeah, which is the emotions, like nachas ruach is like, it's like if you're really angry and you punch a punching bag, you could call it in the sense of nachas ruach, yeah? Your emotions they're able to express themselves, yeah? If you're feeling really loving and you go out and buy your friend something nice, yeah? Then that's called a nachas ruach, meaning you had emotions and then there was an action that allowed the emotions to express themselves. So ruach is emotions, and the nachas of that ruach is when it expresses itself in behavior. So when we're doing mitzvahs, Hashem has nachas ruach. Because his expression, like we said many times, his meyachin, his malchus with us, meaning he bound up his behavior with Am Yisrael. What's his behavior? Shem's behavior is Torah mitzvahs. So he bound up his behavior with us. So when we're doing Torah mitzvahs, he's like, When we're not doing Torah mitzvahs, then he is... That's called koitzer ruach. That's called, and that now comes out as chawan af. That energy that should come out through a nachas ruach ends up coming out of his nostrils, and that creates pranus and oinshim for Klal Yisrael to bring us back in line. So that's called redeeming the hey tatar of the Rebbeinu Shalom is just fixing the behavior, which we're going back right to the beginning of the shir. Fixing the behavior, not the inner world, yeah, which can only happen when you start to separate yourself from your pleasure. If you're identified with your pleasure, you will be doing whatever your pleasure says. And if it's bad, yeah, if you grew up in a certain place where your pleasure is doing stuff that isn't mitzvah, then you'll be doing it. The only way that you can separate yourself from the sin is by separating yourself from the pleasure. That's called Shviras Halev. That will allow you to start behaving correctly, which is called returning the Hey Tatar of the Rebbeinu Shalom's name. And that's the Rebbeinu Shalom going,
Because then he has more presence in this world. That's what
well, he expresses himself into his world through Torah mitzvahs. So the minute we're now doing Torah mitzvahs, only Yidden can do Torah mitzvahs. Hashem says we can't do Torah mitzvahs in this world except through the Yidden. Like tefillah needs to be done by a Yid. That's what it means. He was meyached his malchus with Am Yisrael. He kind of put himself in a position where he's dependent on us. So when we're not acting correctly, that's called Galus Shechina. He's in Galus. Galus is free-flowing expression. Toiche Kaboiro, when the outside is in line with the Ratzon. In this case, it's not in line with your Ratzon, it's in line with the Shem's Ratzon. You're just trumping the system and acting like a tzaddik. That's called Tshuva Tatar. Okay, we should all be Zeichel as well to Hashem. That was chapter 17.
That we're talking about.
Yeah.
But that's in the Kuda.
And the fact we say mamash is because it's in this world, in the mamashas of this world.
But it's in the Kuda. That Nakuda that we.
It's
not a chelik like, you know.
Well, again, you could like a yud is called a nakuda with a tzura.
But
which doesn't make any
more
sense.
Than the yud's more than the nakud that you spoke about before. The nakud doesn't.
Yeah, but a yud is meant to be a nikud, but with a four. It's a paradox. It's a formed nikud, which doesn't. You can't. But we have a diagram of it. Looks like a yud, but it's meant to be a nakuda with a form to it, which again that's paradoxical. You can't understand that.